Welcome to Chanel World Story 22, a channel that always presents news about the history of countries in the world. On this occasion, Chanel World Story 22 will discuss the beginning of the war between North Korea and South Korea. Until now, the two countries are still rivals. In the war between North Korea and South Korea, there were two countries that each gave their support. Like North Korea, which is supported by the Soviet Union, and South Korea, which is supported by America. Then what are the interests between North Korea and the Soviet Union, as well as between South Korea and America? Before continuing to the discussion, please support this channel by liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing, so that this channel can continue to grow. The 1950 Korean War ended without a peace treaty, so technically South Korea and North Korea are still at war. So far, the end of the Korean War has been an armistice, and efforts to conclude a peace treaty have always been deadlocked. So how did the Korean War end in 1950, and why did South and North Korea not unite? The following is a historical summary. According to National Geographic, the history of the Korean War has its roots in the Japanese occupation of Korea during 1910–1945, when World War II ended and the Allies began to dismantle the Japanese Empire. The fate of the Korean Peninsula became a bargain between the United States, US, and the Soviet Union. In 1948, North and South Korea were separated by the 38th parallel, the parallel that runs through the Korean Peninsula. North Korea became a socialist country led by Kim Il-sung and supported by the Soviet Union, while South Korea became a capitalist country led by Syngman Rhee and supported by the US. The reason why Korea is divided into two, because it is expected to balance power in East Asia, but both North Korea and South Korea view each other as illegitimate countries. The Korean War began on June 25, 1950. When the 75,000 North Korean People's Army plunged across the 38th parallel, which separates the Soviet-backed North Korean Democratic Republic of Korea, and the pro-Western Republic of Korea South. This invasion was the first military action in the Cold War. In July, US troops entered the battlefield on behalf of South Korea, and as usual they were fighting communism. However, the US entered the Korean War without a formal declaration of war and without congressional approval. The US is simply pressuring the newly created UN Security Council to allow the use of force to assist South Korea. US President at the time, Harry Truman, did not seek approval from Congress, even though that agency was the sole authority in Uncle Sam's country to declare war. "We are not at war," Truman told the press on June 29, 1950. South Korea was unlawfully attacked by a group of bandits who are neighbors with North Korea. Despite questions about whether Truman exceeded presidential authority, the United States' involvement in the Korean War was officially linked to police action. While the United States had an interest in defending South Korea in the Korean War, the Soviet Union also had a need to support North Korea and assist China. In the early days of the Korean War, UN troops briefly pushed North Korean troops over China's borders, to which China responded by deploying more than 3 million troops to North Korea. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union supplied and trained North Korean and Chinese troops, and sent pilots on missions against UN troops. How did the Korean War end? In the summer of 1951, the forces of both sides engaged in heavy fighting around the 38th parallel. Victims also fell. Negotiations then began in July 1951, but were hampered by the fate of the prisoners of war. Although many prisoners of war captured by American troops did not wish to return to their countries of origin, both North Korea and China insisted that they be returned as a condition of peace. A series of prisoner exchanges took place ahead of the 1953 armistice. More than 75,000 communist prisoners were returned, while no less than 22,000 prisoners of war defected or sought asylum. Many soldiers also disappeared at the end of the Korean War, and their whereabouts are never known. About 80,000 South Korean soldiers were captured in North Korea when the Korean War ended. North Korea has denied having taken any prisoners. But defectors and South Korean officials report the prisoners of war were used as forced labor. Meanwhile, on the US side, there are more than 7,500 troops missing. The Korean War was also forgotten in Uncle Sam's country, because the media attention was not as great as World War I, World War II, or the Vietnam War. On July 27, 1953, North Korea, China and the United States signed the Korean War Armistice Agreement. However, South Korea objected to the division of Korea and neither agreed to an armistice nor signed a formal peace treaty. So even though the battle on the battlefield was over, technically the Korean War was still going on. The death toll from the Korean War is estimated at nearly 40,000 from the US military, 46,000 from South Korean soldiers, 215,000 North Korean soldiers, 400,000 Chinese soldiers, and 4 million civilians. Reunification efforts to unite South Korea and North Korea have yet to come to light, even though a truce should have ended in a peace agreement. South Korea's Syngman Rhee does not want to sign a peace treaty because it wants to defeat its brother, while North Korea continues to develop nuclear weapons and long-range missiles to stem the US invasion. As a result, North Korea was subject to a series of sanctions from the UN Security Council, and the United States still has 28,500 troops in South Korea. Nearly 70 years since the Korean War armistice, South and North Korea have not united because they both claim to be the legitimate rulers of the Korean peninsula.